Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Star Trek Picard is a Star Trek spin-off show, all about the aging Admiral Picard, all of his buddies on his spaceship, and a secret plot involving synthetics, Romulans, Borgs, and some really dodgy writing. Episode 6, The Impossible Box, starts off with Picard and co still reeling from the death of Bruce Maddox last week. Or well, the only one who's really reeling from it is Professor Roberts, and she's the one who killed him, but apparently nobody checked logs or anything and she got away with it scot-free. Or should I say, Scott Pilgrim-free,
I really don't care.
Also, crap elf teenager's really blunt, and he says dumb stuff, as usual. And it's clearly giving her all the bad feels, because after talking to Picard about it, she finds Captain Rios, and he's having like a midnight muckabout with his football, because like racial stereotypes are totally a thing, clearly. And she's in a bad way, and goes in for a kiss, and he's like,
bang, okay?
But then she's like, actually no, this is a bad idea, and he's like, okay, I can be sensitive and helpful instead of that, you know? And she's like, actually no, yeah, fine, we'll bang. But before the crew can actually go to the Borg Cube, their destination, they need a plausible excuse, otherwise they'll just get blown up. So they toss around a few ideas, and Picard's like, no, it has to be official. So then they drag like drunk Raffi out of bed and tell her to call in a favour off some random like old pal of hers. And she's like, yeah, whatever, fine. So that's them. And like Rios puts Raffi back to bed, and it's all like, I have a son, I'm a bad friend. And he's just like, yeah, whatever, bye. And so after they get to the Borg Cube, it's all a little bit much for Picard. He's getting PTSD flashbacks and stuff, but he manages to kind of cope. And they say that only he can go aboard, and he's got to beam to like a random like spot that they've decided. And Elrond Ninja's like, I've got to come too. And Picard's like, I don't think so. And makes him promise like he's going to stay put. So Picard beams over, and of course, because this is a TV show, there's actually nobody there, and it's all spooky corridors, and he's creeped out, and we see like Borgs looking at him, and he's totally starting to freak out, and then he gets grabbed and he panics, and then Hugh pops up and calms him down, because those guys are actually XB, that's ex-Borgs, not Xboxes, and they didn't want him to fall off like the really unsafe gantry that totally doesn't comply with any known health and safety laws. And then it's like bonding time for like Picard and Hugh, because they haven't seen each other since like the Next Generation, so I mean that's been, you know, probably 20 years. And they chat a little bit about what it's like being like an ex-Borg, and Hugh shows them all the other people that have been like freed and reclaimed from the Borg, and it's actually genuinely quite nice and kind of touching. And then Hugh points out that Romulans aren't exactly great to work for either, and he's the only one who can actually leave of his own free will because, you know, he's a Federation citizen and all these reclaimed Borgs aren't, they're just property. And then after that they go to find the robot Lassie, and they find her room's all a mess, and she isn't appearing on the cube at all, which is technically impossible. Meanwhile, earlier on, the robot Lassie was like having nightmares about a dark stormy night when she was wee, and Chad Romulan says, I'll help you out, so tell me about it. And things get a little bit awkward, and then, you know, she asks him about his true name, and it turns out the Romulans have like 3 names, a given name, a family name, and like a secret name, which kind of reminds me of something else I watched recently. And then Chad's sister like comes out and is all arsey as usual, and you know, since those guys are really terribly written, you know, they just act like teenagers, and he tells her that he's almost figured out like the robot Lassie, and it all has to do with their dreams, and he talks about his Romulan Rubik's Cube, and she's like, okay Mr. Patience and Diligence, we'll do it your way. So the next day he like asks the robot Lassie about what her mum said about the dreams, and she's like, oh I don't know, I forgot, because I fell asleep halfway through the conversation. And he's like, that's strange, because I've checked the logs, and every time you phone your mum you fall asleep after 70 seconds. And she's like, no way. So then she calls her mum up, and sure enough starts to fall asleep, and then even tries to keep herself awake but still ends up falling asleep. So she gets totally freaked out by this and scans all her possessions, and it turns out that absolutely everything that she owns is only 3 years old, even the photos and the childhood toys. And she tells Chad about this, and he's like, well, maybe someone implanted memories in you and they're messing with you, or they've got you on a secret mission to find out something or find someone. And he suggests they do like some kind of Romulan guided meditation in a special room. And so he takes her there and guides her around the room, and they start to uncover the dream, and she sees herself on a table, and she's like some kind of wooden Pinocchio doll. And they're on like a planet, and there's storms and 2 red moons. And he's like, wow, that's really useful info, so that's great. Basically, you're a robot, so bye. And he locks her in the room with his magic box. Only this time, it's not the same one. And sort of stuff leaks out of it, like red, nasty radiation, and it starts to burn her and hurt her. But because she's like a robot, she smashes through the wooden floor of the room. The wooden floor of the room on a spaceship in a Borg Cube. It's always the trees, isn't it? Anyway, yeah, this tips off Picard and Hugh, and they end up rushing to where she's about to drop down, which was awfully lucky. And then Hugh's like, Romulans are coming, so I've got a way out. So they leads them to a special room where the Borg Queen like has a teleporter. Now this is something nobody else knows about, and so they use that. Like, and Picard tells the ship to meet him at another planet he's going to beam to, and they're like, okay, but where's Ninja Elf guy? And then a bunch of Romulan guards appear, and the ninja elf like malkies the hell out of them, and Picard's like, I'm a little bit cross that you left the ship, elf guy, but thanks for straight up murdering 3 security guards that were totally just doing their jobs. And Hugh's like, well, I'll stay behind and make sure that they don't know this room exists. And Elrond's like, yeah, I'll do the same. So Picard and Robot Lassie run through the thing and teleport away, and the others like shut it down. And just as the secret door shuts behind them, the ninja's like, choose life, guys. So yeah, cheers, but I'm not really sure I want to choose life at this point. So where are we at this point in the show Picard? Well, we've reached episode 6 out of 10. I mean, I originally thought there was only 8 episodes, my mistake. So there's actually apparently 10. So yeah, so we're now past the halfway mark, and yet I feel like we're only on what should be maybe episode 3 of a season. I mean, it feels like we should have been further on by this point. And the show's not been entirely without merit so far. I mean, this week was a damn sight better than last week's kind of goofy, bloody, peddling water nonsense. And there were some highlights. I mean, for a start, right? At least by the end of this episode, we know the plot's going somewhere. The bad guys have got their info, so they can do a thing. And Picard's met up with Soji, so he can do a thing. And the crew have got to find them, so they've got to do a thing, and they're all separated, so that's another thing. And then, so the things can happen now. And this episode was like the one that actually probably had the best scene in the show so far, and that was Picard and Hugh catching up. I mean, I really, really enjoyed this. Honestly, the whole bit with them talking about what it's like to be ex-Borg and their own issues. I mean, hell, this is exactly what the show should have been about all along. It was a bit like that tiny moment last week with like 7 of 9. This is the real arc of what Picard's character could be about. And it's great to actually have this here. And also, John Del Arco's just been fantastic. I mean, honestly, he wasn't even a character I really thought about much in the original show. He was fine in a couple of episodes, but in this, he's probably the most interesting character, and he's the only person who seems to have a vested interest in something that's actually just getting on with it. And he's also really charismatic. I mean, I don't understand why the guy just hasn't got more to do in this show. And annoyingly, it looks kind of like they might be killing him off next week. But the thing is, when it comes to Picard and the Borg, he's got issues. Obviously, he was, turned into one of them. And even after he was freed, I mean, there was all that episode where he went and met up with his brother and then finally broke down in tears because, so many people had died because of him.
He used me to kill and to destroy, and I couldn't stop. I shouldn't have been able to stop them.
And then he's constantly having to confront people like Captain Sisko in Deep Space Nine, and who hated him because Sisko's wife died directly because of Locutus and the Borg, or the flashbacks and guilt and stuff that's come up in different things. I mean, you've had the stuff all that happened in Star Trek First Contact, which was all about him finally defeating the Borg Queen.
I believe you are allowing your personal experience with the Borg to influence your judgment.
You're afraid. You want to destroy the ship and run away. You coward.
I mean, this is right material to make a show about. And, not all the kind of fluff that the show's been about before. And as I said, Stewart and Del Arco do really good work in their scenes. I mean, yeah, honestly, the show should have just been more about this.
All these years, you're showing what the Borg are underneath. The victims.
And less about all this nonsense. But that, sadly, is pretty much most of the things that I can say that are good about this. I mean, cinematography was good. I mean, special effects were good. I quite liked the bit about her finding herself and being the sort of Pinocchio thing where she was like a wooden doll on the table. I mean, yeah, Pinocchio thing has always been a thing with Data, so I kind of like that. And you don't know who her father is. I'm presuming it's Data. That'll be the point about it, maybe, but we'll see. But the problems with Picard, honestly, they just seem to multiply week in and week on. I mean, if one aspect of Picard is better one week, it feels like 2 other ones have to get worse just to keep everything on balance on the even keel. I mean, as I said, this week was better than last week because things actually got moving and it wasn't a tonal mess and it wasn't trite and repetitive and you weren't getting torture porn, moments that looked like they were a horror film. And instead, this week we got what felt like first-year film school student levels of writing in every single scene. And the concept of show and tell just doesn't exist in this dojo in any way whatsoever. And every character seems to go around describing what's happened to them and their thoughts in the most basic and idiotic ways possible. I mean, what do I mean? Well, right, okay, let's start out with Chad and Cersei Romulan. I mean, who literally spend their time acting like the pair out of Cruel Intentions. And they're written terribly, but these are supposed to be top Romulan government secret agents, and yet they act with each other like a pair of teenagers arguing in their parents' house about who has to do the washing up that night.
That's mine. Give it back. You'll break it.
I never understood your fascination with this toy.
I mean, honestly, I know this is a TV show, so I mean, we can sidestep the fact that in real life and also in previous Star Trek shows, people had to do things like write up reports and explain what their actions were and come out with plans of what they're going to do. But in this, it's like Cersei Lassie somehow doesn't know what Chad's doing, and she seems to outrank him, and she gets to sneak into his room and just give him grief, but doesn't actually seem to actively participate in doing anything else. She's just there, and yet it doesn't actually make any sense, because if she outranks him, she should know his mission, and there should be talk about this, or did he work for somebody else? But if so, who's this person? Is it the Commodore we saw? Because we've never actually seen her talking to Chad Romulan. So what's going on? And I suspect some of this might be because some of the role has originally been cut, because Cersei Romulan, when at the beginning of the show, when she was kind of humanoid, that seemed a bit strange because they made a mention of it in like the first episode or two, and then just never again she was suddenly Romulan. So I wonder if there was either scenes or a plot line to do with that, and that's just gone. And with Chad Romulan, I mean, the show's taken great pains to show that he cares a bit about Soji, and at the same time he's got no qualms about getting her dead at the end. I mean, he cries a wee bit, but unless that was all a big ruse and it was fake radiation and actually he was trying to make her escape, which I really hope not, because that would just be kind of really cheesy. But yeah, he's supposed to be worried that she's going to go bad and that she's going to turn into a robot crazy like her sister did, and he doesn't want to tip her off. But apparently, her realizing that she's a robot isn't going to tip her off. I mean, that's lucky, because he basically pushes her into realizing that she's not a real person, and like she's trying to stay awake and realizing things that are wrong, and it all seems kind of baffling and really conveniently easy to suddenly work it out all of a sudden. And then after, like, he realizes it's a planet with 2 moons and lightning, he's like, that'll do, bye. Oh, well, you better get dead. And it all seemed a bit strange. And it didn't make an awful lot of sense to me. And what's more, I don't do this much, but why couldn't the scene kind of gone like this?
Why was he working on me?
It's okay. It was just a nightmare. Let's figure it out later.
We're being okay.
But no, instead he's like, he knows how dangerous she is, but then he puts her in a room with the slow radiation thing, rather than like the stuff that you saw in like Star Trek Nemesis, which like melts people almost immediately, or even just like shoot in the heart, like 7 and 9 did the other week. And also, wedding floors. Wedding floors. Now, since when did spaceships have wooden floors? Like, outside of maybe like, that famous old Alien 3 script that never got made where it was about a wooden spaceship. Now, this is still a Borg cube, and we've seen the floors are all metal, we've seen loads of stuff like that, so why would it be made of wood? Now, I presume the Romulans made this room, because it's part of their, like, meditation chamber. So they made that room, and they've made it completely signal-proof, so that you can't actually scan for life forms in that room. And then they put in a whole bunch of laminate flooring. But for some reason, the laminate flooring is like 3 foot off the ground because, like, I don't know, they didn't want to put it flat on the deck because of religious significance or something, which allows her to have a person-sized hole she can jump into underneath the wooden floor. I mean, that doesn't make sense. Why is it, like, the room outside's exactly level? I mean, did it need to be? I mean, it seems awfully convenient. And it's awfully convenient that when she jumps out, Hugh and Picard are just in the same, like, place as them. I mean, even though, and the fact that they were in running distance of wherever it was that she bust out of 2 seconds earlier on the floor above them. And that's the problem with this show. It's all convenient stuff. It's like, just don't think about it. Like, Professor Robot was like, oh yeah, Maddox died and, he had a heart attack or something. And then nobody checks the records. Don't think about it. But then how many times she sort of like gone in and changed logs or erased the EMH's memory or something because she'd had to do something like that. And then frankly, the whole idea of it just stunk of bad writing. Really bad. Don't think about it writing. Or how Picard's like, no, only this one idea will work. So let's get Raffi out to like have a really bad conversation. Which made me think that actually probably that's a scene where they've had to cut stuff out and they've just thrown together a little reshoot scene. And also Raffi, bloody hell, why is Raffi in this show? I mean, you're telling me after 60 years of Starfleet, Picard doesn't have any old favours and any old pals he can call in? I mean, it's not like he knew everybody in the galaxy. I mean, he literally did. But apparently nobody's on his side apart from Raffi, this one insubordinate, alcoholic, ganja-vaping, narky, grumpy, and frankly, occasionally really wooden acting miscreant. Now, she's the one who can do it while she's hammered, and we're meant to care. I mean, this is meant to show that she's so awesome she can do it even when she's drunk. I mean, I just don't care about her. I don't care about any of these characters. I mean, obviously I love Picard because, he's Captain Jean-Luc Picard. But aside from that nostalgia factor, I don't care about the crew. I've no investment in any of them. Hell, as I said, the only person I've got investment in the entire show is Hugh, and he's only like in a minor character role. And there's also myriad wee things that keeps making you stop and think, what? Like, right, the communicators thing, they don't have any useful info. Like, I mean, put it this way, right? When 7 and 9, like, called the other week, and they were like,
Channel put him on.
He's asking permission to beam over. His ship's breaking up. His shields are failing.
Beam him in.
Got him.
and then finally she beams over and they're like, oh, it's a she. It's like, what, you telling me that in the middle of, like, a busy firefight, Seven stopped to write a text message out on the computer by hand? It wasn't a voice message. She wasn't communicating by voice. I mean, Uhura in the original series, everybody messaged her and she had that little ear thing, like a little Bluetooth headset thing she always wore, because people actually were talking over the radio to her. Now, they used to do that. They used to get people on, like, over that or on literally on the view screen. And this week they just don't do it. They just don't do that at all in this show now because it's the future and people can't be bothered. Everyone's gone back to using text messages or something. It doesn't make any sense. And also, I had a total giggle when they did that moment when Picard's like looking at the photo of himself as Locutus and being freaked out. And that should have been a really affecting moment, except that they had him looking at a mirrored image photo, and I couldn't work out why until they did the shot where it went on the other side. And I was like, okay, it's a cool shot of him, you know, seeing him through the screen and sort of like low opacity see-through kind of thing. And then he touches the side of his face, which has all the gear on it. But right, that's because that's the side of the face that had the gear on it. But if he was looking at a photo of it, the gear would be on the other side of the face, unless it was the wrong way round. So yeah, unfortunately, that completely didn't work for me. It was a nice idea, guys, but you blew it. And the saddest thing is that the bare bones and idea of this show, the concept, is actually pretty good. I mean, on paper, the concept of Picard actually sounds not bad, but in execution, it's sloppy, it's ugly, and it's horrible. And most of that hasn't anything to do with like the actual physical on-the-day production of this show. I mean, most of the acting's okay. You know, some of the choices are a bit weird, but it seems to be the writers and producers who are mostly the same people. I mean, there's no shortage of videos online when people talk about like problems with producers and writing and things like that. But honestly, if you look at them, if you actually look at who the people involved on IMDb, you've got like Akiva Goldsman, and he's got a reputation for being a churner out of kind of ropey by the numbers film and TV. I mean, a few good things. I'm not going to, do him down. He's done some decent stuff. But to be honest, most of the rest of them haven't really done an awful lot. I mean, there's one guy that I think he wrote the script for John Carter, which is all right, and he'd done a couple other things. But then everything other than that is just tiny wee TV things that weren't that great. I think one of the people has literally only worked on this in like a cop show, and one of the other ones has only ever worked on Star Trek Discovery and has written a couple of like Voyager fan novels. I mean, that's it. That's your writing team. So I'm afraid I've got to point my finger straight at the writer's room here. And if you write trash, you get trash TV. It doesn't matter how great the actors are. It doesn't matter how good the effects are. The show itself won't hold together, and you're not going to get good TV numbers. You might get a few new folk coming in, and you might get some fans of the property, the ones that you relied on to swell the numbers, but everyone else is going to drop off in disgust. In fact, most of those people will drop off in disgust because they're bored out of their minds. Now, we were 6 episodes out of 10 down, and this show's dragging its heels. And when it hasn't been dragging its heels, it's filled in the gaps with like bursts of really, really facile exposition. And I'm getting sick of it. I mean, I don't wish any ill on people. I want people to keep their jobs and stuff. But I don't think it would be a bad thing if all the people involved with this went and did a different job and a completely new bunch of writers came on next season. It would only make this show better. So, till next time, I've been Ian, and those have been my grumpy opinions.